For my next video, I wanted to talk about magical thinking. And magical thinking is something that is a huge part of someone's life who has obsessive compulsive disorder, but it's also a part of someone's life who has generalized anxiety disorder. And what magical thinking is it's thinking that a certain thought or action will affect either how an event is going to play out or somebody else's actions. And the correlation is not there is no actual correlation. Our reasonable mind would find no correlation between the two things. Examples could be with obsessive compulsive disorder. They could have a compulsion where they wash their hands or turn the doorknob a certain number of times or avoid cracks to prevent other bad events from happening. It could be, something bad happening to one of their loved ones. It could be something bad happening to themselves. Sometimes they might do that to control something that they think that they might do that would be bad. But either way, the two are completely unrelated. Like, what sense does it make to avoid a crack to keep a loved one from dying? That makes no sense. But also, another reason why I decided to do this video is because it's actually a big and important part of what goes wrong with people who have generalized anxiety disorder. See, we worry or we magical think as a way to control, to give us a sense of control. Like I've stated in some of my other videos, people with these specific mental health conditions tend to be control freaks. That's the way that works. So you might not realize, but if you have, if you worry about something, right, something bad that could happen, and it doesn't happen, then our minds are reinforced that somehow by us worrying about that thing is the reason why it didn't happen. Of course, this doesn't make any sense. And for us with anxiety, this can really consume us, right? I know personally, I have died 1 million deaths. I have gone through 1 million different scenarios. I always am. I always have been through these last 21 years. And a lot of the times it'll be concerning my family. I'll think of worst case scenarios and I'll think of them over and over again. And no doubt in some way, shape, or form, my mind has formed a connection that by doing this, the bad thing actually isn't going to happen. The problem is we don't have that kind of control. As human beings, we can control our actions. That's what we can control. So it can really start to interfere with your life, because I know that personally, I have spent so much time, thinking about worst case scenarios, catastrophizing, thinking about what might happen. And what that does is, and why I'm making the video is because it robs you of your life, right? The most precious commodity we have is our time. It's our time and our energy. And magical thinking will rob you of time and energy. It is very exhausting to consider every possible negative scenario. It's exhausting. Mentally exhausting, emotionally exhausting. So when we're held captive to magical thinking, we generally don't end up being very productive. We don't end up being very good husbands, very good wives, very good fathers, very good mothers, because we're consumed with making connections that have no basis in reality, that also emotionally will exhaust us. So how do we deal with this? If if magical thinking, if we are a victim of magical thinking, and most of us are, right? Even neurotypical people have some magical thinking they engage in, whether it's a lucky shirt or it's avoiding the number 13. But for a neurotypical person, that's their little idiosyncrasy. And if for some reason they have to use the number 13 or they can't wear their lucky shirt, their life goes on. No big deal. When you have obsessive compulsive disorder or anxiety disorder, it's not like that. We're much more rigid once our mind has made a connection that is not a viable connection, is not a connection based in fact. So, so what can we do if we find ourselves held victim to magical thinking? Well, there are a couple of avenues that, in my personal experience, have helped me a lot. Number one, exposure therapy. So what we need to do is we need to prove to our intellectual minds that there is no connection. So if we think washing our hands is keeping a bad event from happening, we need to not wash our hands. I can assure you that that bad event's not going to happen because you didn't wash your hands. We need to get ourselves to try to think about something else instead of worrying about an event, thinking that worrying about it is going to keep it from happening. And if we get distracted and we don't worry about it and nothing bad happens, that's the exposure therapy we need. We need to prove to our logical minds that the connection that we have formed is fallacious and fictitious, and worst of all, it's going to hold us in an imaginary prison instead of allowing us to use all of the energy, all the mental energy to be creative, to excel at our jobs, to excel as husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, whatever relationship. We'll have the emotional energy to invest in it if we are not held captive to magical thinking. Another thing that really can be helpful is medication. Now, this will be something that works extremely well for some people, and other people this won't work as well for. But you work with your mental health professional, and if they make the decision to try pharmaceutical intervention, just know that there is a chance that it's really going to help with the magical thinking and making these irrational connections that hold us prisoner in our lives. The other thing, the three things I always mention are just as important here. In fact, I deal with somebody with obsessive compulsive disorder on a regular basis. And I notice that when they don't get enough sleep, they tend to be a lot worse with their magical thinking, with their obsessive compulsive disorder. So make sure you get enough sleep and sufficient quality of sleep. Make sure you get exercise. Shoot for at least 3 times a week, 30 minutes a session. If you can do more, great. And also try to eat in a balanced fashion in a way where food is not controlling you. So those are also very important in dealing with magical thinking. But so you have pharmaceutical intervention, you have exposure therapy, you have making good routines for yourself when it comes to your health. And you'll notice that when you confront that magical thinking and you do the exposure, it'll get exposed really quickly. And if something, did happen to happen, excuse the way I phrase that, but we still are not going to be the reason why. What logical sense can you make of our thoughts or our rituals controlling world events, controlling events with our loved ones, or controlling bad things from happening? It makes no sense. You are not Neo in the Matrix. There is a spoon. And why this is so important is because People with these conditions have so much intelligence and creativity that they are using on the conditions like magical thinking. And if you can free up that time that your mind is using and that creativity that your mind is using on magical thinking to invest into your actual life and the surroundings and your world around you, the things you can accomplish are limitless. So I felt like that was why I would do a short video on magical thinking. I'm sure that I'll do a more involved video in the future, also with potentially interviewing people who've experienced and dealt with magical thinking. I wanted to take this time to thank everybody who has commented, who's liked, shared, subscribed. It's been really nice getting people's input, and I'm very grateful for that. So until my next video, take care.